What's up everybody, Noah from Stage 3 Motorsports here, and today we're going to be taking a completed look at our 2020 giveaway F-150. Now, if you guys have been following along with this build and you've been watching all the installs and build updates and everything else, then you probably already know where this truck stands, or even if you saw that last teaser video we put out, you get a pretty good idea of what we've done. But we wanted to take one last look at this truck, go through the whole thing, all the parts that have been added, every mod that we did, and really just showcase what this build looks like and give you guys some ideas maybe for your own build, just in case you don't happen to win this specific truck. Now, with all that being said, there will be some repeat information in here, obviously, from the other videos, so if you did see those, there might not be a lot of new stuff in here to get you excited, but if you did miss out on some of the other parts of the build and you want to see everything that happened, this will probably be the video for you. To kick things off, let's talk about the wheels, tires, and suspension on this truck. Now, as you can see here, we've got the Black Rhino Ridge wheels. They're a 17 by 8.5, and we wrap those in these Cooper STT Pro mud terrains, which are a 315/70/17. Now, that's basically the factory Raptor size tire, which is very close to a 35. It's around a 34.8 or something like that. So it's a really good fit on this vehicle, and with all the other mods we did for suspension and the bumpers and everything, it definitely fills it out right. It doesn't look too small, and it's not too big to where it's cumbersome on the vehicle and just rubs constantly. It also is obviously a mud terrain, which is going to give this truck that little extra advantage off-road in deep mud, sand, or even on some really rocky, shaly areas. Now, of course, to fit a wheel and tire package like this, we were going to have to make some changes to the suspension, so Icon came through and helped us out with a brand new Stage 5 kit. What that entitles is we've got 2.5 coilovers up front with the remote resis. We also have their billet aluminum upper control arms with the delta joints in there, and we have 2.5 rear shocks with the piggyback reservoirs on them. This is an excellent kit, pretty much top of the line for what Icon makes for this vehicle, and it's going to be extremely capable out in the desert while still maintaining a lot of on-road comfort. That's usually one of our favorite parts about the Icon systems, is that they run a pretty good balance between daily drivability as well as off-road capability. Something to note with this Stage 5 kit is that it is adjustable in the front as well, so we didn't change the rear ride height at all, and the shocks don't adjust that rear ride height, but up front we were able to get it set at 2.5 inches, which is pretty much dead level for this truck, and that gave us plenty of room to clear this wheel and tire setup. Now, I know a lot of guys are going to be asking for their own vehicle if we had to cut with that suspension lift size and this tire size to make everything fit, and the reality is, yeah, there was some trimming and some cutting that had to happen here, but a lot of it was going to happen regardless because of the front bumper. So you can see that we cut the inner fenders a little, took some plastic off there. We had to cut the crash bars out of the front, and we trimmed the rear ones out as well. So a lot of that opened up way more space for this thing to still articulate and turn right and not rub and catch constantly, to where it drives really, really nice on the road and we don't have issues with it binding up in the dirt. So it's pretty much the perfect setup with all this coming together. So moving on to talking about the body armor for this truck, we got a lot of really good equipment from ADD here, and I'll start at the back with that ADB Bomber rear bumper. Overall, I think the look of it is super slick. It fits very nicely with the body lines of the vehicle, and just because of how it's designed, it's also really high clearance, and it sort of comes up above that hitch receiver in the back, which I think is a really nice look. It's kind of utilitarian. It looks very rugged. I know not everybody loves that, and some guys prefer more of a flush or paint matched look, but for this type of build, I think it works well. Obviously, like all of ADD's equipment, it's all powder coated. Everything's really clean. It's designed to take some abuse off-road. It's not gonna rust out or get chips and dings in it. So this is something that we can depend on. And then within that bumper, we also had two little open pockets to mount some lights. So I threw some of the rigid radiance pods in there with that red backlight, and we tied all that together so that that red backlight comes on with the tail lights, and we have the center white portion in the rigid radiance pods, which comes on when you put it in reverse. Everything's tied into where it's just wired in automatically. There's no switches, so as soon as you put it in reverse or turn on your lights, those come on, which is really handy. Makes it feel kind of factory and like it's part of the truck, and I think it looks really nice with that red accent just because the truck is already bright red all over. While it's not technically body armor, one other thing we have in the back with that bumper is two of ADD's universal tire carriers. We plopped both of those in the bed and put two full-size spares in there, so not only is it a really cool Baja kind of inspired look, but it does provide some functionality, because if you are going to run this truck hard out in the desert and push this thing, you want to have the ability to put a full-size spare on there should something go wrong. I think they look really good in the back, and obviously we went for the red straps to match just to kind of keep that accent flowing, and so it's definitely a really slick style for this vehicle. Coming up to the front, we'll finally talk about this ADD Bomber front bumper. which this has probably been one of the most exciting parts of this truck and one of the pieces that people have liked the most of all the installs we've done. You can see right off the bat that it sort of blends with that Baja style that I've mentioned. We've got the 4 big round rigid 360s in there and then 2 little pods on the sides. And the way it's designed, it also kind of has a bash plate built into the bumper that tucks underneath. Now, typical ADB fashion, it is plenty durable. The lines are really clean on the truck. You can tell that they spent some time to make sure that this was going to match up with that valance for the grille. Nothing looks gapped weird. There wasn't any huge fitment issues. So it's definitely a very flush, kind of proper factory feeling bumper while still maintaining that aftermarket aggressive look that people want. Now, with the rigid lights that I mentioned in there earlier, the way we set it up, we basically have 2 dualies on the sides that act as just kind of a wide flood of light around the corners of the vehicle, and those are tied into the factory fog light wiring because that fog light switch was already there, and obviously with this bumper we lost the factory fog lights anyways, so we figured we'd make use of that feature. Then in the center, I went ahead and set it up with 2 360s that are 6-inch spots and then 2 that are 6-inch driving pattern. What this allows is 2 different switches, so you can run either the spots or the driving pattern or both at the same time, depending on what your situation is and how you're running the vehicle. And it also just gives you a better wide fill of light. So you have the spots to kind of reach some distance. Once you get up to speed, you're seeing farther ahead, whereas the driving lights help fill in around the front of the vehicle and you can see what's more immediately coming at you or where you're going into a corner. This just kind of really fills out the lighting setup for this truck and makes it a lot more capable for nighttime desert running. With all this talk about lighting upgrades, I think the next logical step is to talk about these AlphaRex headlights. Now, right off the bat, you can see we've got the Nova Series headlights here that are Midnight Edition, so these things are really blacked out, and the Midnight Edition really just separates itself in that the DRL strip around the outside is also kind of smoked, so that way the full kind of black effect is really working here on this truck. I think it's a really good accent with all the black details like the bumpers and the blacked out grille and black wheels. And obviously these lights were going to be a big upgrade just in light output and regular performance for driving on the road. The way this truck came equipped from factory was just with those stock halogens, so these are now LED equipped, which is fantastic. They have the projector beams in there to give it a nice even cast of light out in front of the vehicle, and then obviously the DRL upgrades and everything are kind of just a neat touch that help give it a little bit more of a sense of quality. So you have a lot of the neat features like sequential blinkers on here, or when you kick your hazards on, it'll flash sequentially on both sides. Then you also get the startup sequence, so whenever you turn on the vehicle or unlock it or something like that, it'll kick the lights on. You'll see it run through that startup where it kind of flashes all the LEDs around. Looks really cool. It's maybe a bit mall crawler-ish depending on who you ask, but I like it on this truck. I also figure it's worth mentioning that these AlphaRex headlights are truly plug and play, and so in our install video you can see what we did to get them put in here, but it was a pretty simple install and I was really pleased with how well they worked because all of these features are built into the light without tacking on a bunch of extra wiring or adding little mysterious electrical boxes inside the truck. It's very flush, very factory, which is certainly a big plus in a vehicle like this. Moving on from lighting, let's talk about some of the performance upgrades for this truck. Now, I'm going to use the term performance lightly here because we didn't really go for huge power adders for the most part. I know a lot of folks wanted us to put a blower on this thing, and personally I wanted that too. It really works well on a 5.0, but with this build and with how things played out, it just wasn't in the cards right now. So we did throw a couple other mods in there just to give it a better sound and really more of a performance feel. Now, one of those things is a new Roush cold air intake under the hood. This is obviously pretty simple upgrade, just swapping out that factory air box and getting something with an oiled reusable filter in it that can be cleaned and provides just a little more airflow. But more than anything else, you get a bit more intake sound and it just kind of opens up the noise from the motor there, which some people don't love intake sound. I think it's good here, but it was just a little mod that was worth doing. Now, moving around to the back, we did one other big change, and that was the AWE exhaust system. This is a catback dual exit kit that looks really good on this truck. You saw it when we did the bumper. There's those big fat tips that kind of tuck right up into the curves of that ADB Bomber, and that was more of an accident. We didn't realize it was going to fit that nice, but it looks excellent on this truck, and most importantly, this exhaust sounds amazing. On these 5.0s, it's hard to go wrong with an exhaust kit just because it's such a throaty, really nice sounding motor to begin with, but AWE did a good job of really refining that sound and creating something that is rugged and tough when you want it to be and when you get on the throttle, but isn't a bear to live with. This kit has virtually no drone and makes very little sound when you're just cruising on the highway or down some back streets and you're not really laying into the throttle. It mellows out a lot. It's probably not going to cause a lot of issues for you and your neighbors. Obviously, the fit and finish on it looks excellent. And it's one of the better fitting exhausts on the market just in general. I think AWE did a really good job of making sure that this felt like something that belonged on this truck and wasn't just pieced together. Now, on top of the intake and exhaust setup, one other little power mod we added was a tuner from 5 Star Tuning. Now, they hooked us up with an SCT BDX tuner, which is a nice little handheld device, and this is just to give that truck a push in the right direction. I feel like it's already pretty adequately powered, and the 5.0 with the 10-speed is plenty peppy. It doesn't seem like this truck's a dog or has trouble turning these tires, but with that tuner in there, it does provide a little bit of room to give it a touch of extra power, change those shift points up a little, and really squeeze the last little bit of juice there is in there to just make it that much more nice to drive, and obviously to help it too with towing or anything else. Transitioning from power mods to actual interior upgrades, we didn't do a whole lot on this vehicle just because the interior was already pretty nicely outfitted from Ford. Being an XLT with that sport package on there and a few other little upgrades, it's still got a lot of nice stuff in terms of nice black cloth seats with the red stitching, red trim on the little shifter. You're gonna get that good sync system. Still has seat heaters, sunroof, all that awesome stuff. So there wasn't a lot to change there, but one of the things we did want to make sure we touched was the factory sound system, because this truck does have base level audio in it, which means there's no factory sub, there's no Sony upgrade or B&O or anything like that. So it's a little on the weak side, and we wanted something that hit a bit harder. With that being said, Kicker helped us out, sent us a substage kit for the back, and essentially what it does is it just plops into the factory location behind that rear seat, kind of up against the back of the cab, and connects into the factory wiring with just a little bit of additional wiring into the engine bay, giving us a really nice sub that feels pretty much factory and works the way you'd intend, but has a way better sound than the base level audio in this truck would have had just right out of the box. Now, winding down to the last 2 mods on this truck, most of the stuff we've done here has obviously been very off-road focused and has made this truck a lot more daily drivable, but these last 2 upgrades were almost more towing focused than anything else. So what we had was a new Stop Z36 brake kit and a Hellwig rear sway bar. So for that Stop kit, what it essentially entitles is new drilled and slotted rotors in the front and back, as well as some new pads all the way around, which obviously this truck being a 2020 and being brand new with almost no miles on it, didn't have wore out brakes to begin with. But what this allows is a better brake pad compound and a better rotor that are more adequately suited for holding the extra weight that we added to the truck, as well as any additional weight you'd have if you were going to tow with it. So this just provides that little bit more comfort in using the vehicle as a real truck and not having to worry about stressing those brakes or warping the rotors or things under extreme loads. And so it seemed like a worthwhile mod for this vehicle. Now, talking about the Hellwig rear sway bar, this is one of those upgrades that I could have mentioned as a suspension upgrade at the beginning of the video, but it felt like it leans a bit more towards towing, because the general idea here is that this rear sway bar stiffens up the back end of the truck, kind of removes that body roll, gives it more of a planted feel on the road, and is going to help the truck to stay in better control when you have a trailer behind it or are hauling something a little bit heavier in the bed. So that's one of those mods that definitely plays into more of the daily driver or actual truck usage side of this, not so much the off-road side of the vehicle. So that brings us to the end of this build. That is every single part we've done start to finish, and overall I think the truck came together extremely nicely. This build is a really good setup for anybody that wants a daily drivable but still off-road capable F-150, and it's certainly worth getting entered to win. Now, with that being said, the window is closing for your chance to get in there and try and win this F-150, so make sure you head down in the description below. We'll have a link there that'll shoot you over to the giveaway page on our website, and that'll kind of explain how to get entered and how you can boost your chances. So definitely make sure you check that out while you still can. Also, one last thing I wanted to note at the end, there are installs and build updates, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, for pretty much every part on this vehicle. So if you do have questions on what went into the installs, what these parts are like, or how hard they were to install, definitely check out our playlist on this build so you can find out all those details. And we'll also have all the brands and individual links to these parts on the giveaway page when you take a look at that. So there's plenty of information out there for you to look at if you want to replicate this build. As always, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it if you stuck this video through to the end, and I will see you next time.